Nothing gives teenagers a stiffy more than a car spitting flames, right? Fans of this trend will swarm to get footage of cars revving for their Instagram or TikTok. It's good video and everybody loves it. But I remember a time when teenage boys were more interested in filming girls, but hey, you do you, boo. Who am I to judge? So what's all the fuss about? We're gonna find out right after my commercial message. Stay tuned. Did you know that the average driver gets 9 traffic tickets in their lifetime? Look, I'll be the first to admit that I've taken maybe a couple of liberties with traffic laws back in the day. And of course, when I got caught, I had to go to court to fight the ticket, which was always a hassle. And each time that I lost my case, it meant big fines, points on my record, and higher insurance premiums. Eventually, I realized that nothing beats having a good attorney argue your case in court. So here's what you do. You download the Off the Record app to your phone and register for an account. And if you get a ticket, simply upload a photo of your ticket into the app and you will be quickly matched with a lawyer in your jurisdiction. Your lawyer will start working your case right away, and in most cases, you'll never have to set foot in a courtroom. Off the Record has a 97% success rate and a 4.9 star rating on Google. And guess what? They even offer a money-back guarantee if they aren't able to reduce the points or keep that ticket fully off your record. Best of all, I've arranged a 10% discount for all of my YouTube viewers, so download the app and register using the referral code FASTLIFE to receive 10% off your first case. Pops, bangs, crackle tunes, and cars that spit fire. Is there anything better than this? Depending on your point of view, you either love it or you hate it, but it's usually the left lane hugging Prius owners who hate it, and we don't care about those people, do we? But where did it start? How did it get to be so cool with so many people? For old timers like me, we used to call it run on or overrun or after fire, depending on where you live. I'm old. What are you going to do? You typically only see this on race cars going back to around the 1970s and 60s, and before that, among hot rodders and lowriders going back as far as the 1950s. See, we were cool back then too. Back in the days of carburetors and super rich air fuel mixtures, it was just a matter of revving the piss out of the engine to get enough unburned fuel all inside of that glass pack muffler kind of design that we had back in the era, and the thing would catch on fire naturally without any other input. Race cars were doing it because super rich air fuel mixtures, and it would get built up in the hot exhaust. It would spontaneously combust. Today, this phenomenon basically comes from one or two possible scenarios. One of those scenarios comes from the use of a rev limiter that cuts the ignition off but leaves the fuel on, so it's still squirting fuel into the combustion chamber. And then the other occurs when there's too much fuel added at high RPM. Both of these conditions often exist naturally in race cars, especially back in the days of multiple carburetors like I was just mentioning. But with the advent of sophisticated ECU tuning and other advancements in technology, many street cars today can replicate this exact condition. And I'll accept my role for telling the producers about this during Fast and Furious, which also popularized this phenomenon, although seasoned car veterans have known about this for decades. In the movie, of course, we faked it. We used propane tanks filled with special gaseous mixtures, MSD coils, 6AL boxes, all wired into a spark plug that we mounted to the exhaust system just before the exhaust tip to create the effect. So it was lighting a gaseous mixture like a barbecue. And none of those cars would have spit flames in real life in that movie, except for maybe the RX-7 and the Supra, and only in certain conditions. Today, even EcoBoost Mustangs can spit flames. Are we making progress here?
Oh, that's cold.
Car shows are full of people all too happy to show off their flame-throwing tunes and pops and bangs maps and all the other stuff. And it's not just the tuner guys, of course. There are tons of exotic car owners who enjoy it too. So here's how it works. As an internal combustion engine draws in vaporized fuel and oxygen, they get mixed together and a spark plug ignites that mixture. We all know that, right? The resulting combustion is a mini explosion, if you will, that pushes the piston down, which in turn turns the crankshaft, which sends the power through the drive chain all the way out to the wheels, through the axles, and then the car moves. That's how it works, right? Sometimes not all of the fuel gets burned in time. When that unburned fuel gets into the exhaust pipes, and those exhaust pipes get super hot from racing or revving, all of that unburned fuel comes into contact with outside oxygen as it exits the exhaust tip, and it self-ignites into a flash of fire. So that's basically what's happening. Now, normal cars don't do this on its own. Your daddy's Lexus, for example, or any other typical off-the-shelf car, doesn't do this from the factory for several reasons, not the least of which is the fact that it's a low horsepower application, and passenger cars have multiple catalytic converters to catch this unburned fuel. Since in 1996, many of them have 4 catalytic converters. Further, most passenger cars have an exhaust system that it goes for about 12 feet long or so. Even if unburned fuel got dumped into the exhaust, it would have cooled off long before it could turn into fire at the tailpipe, so that's why it doesn't happen. Other cars, like rear-engine cars, say Lamborghinis, McLarens, or Ferraris, they can produce this effect with little effort, but for different reasons. Lamborghinis are #1 producing far more horsepower than your average street car, so far more fuel is going into its V12 engine during every combustion cycle. And since the engine is sitting way out in the back of the car, the exhaust is still superheated because it's so short when it comes out of the tailpipe. And of course, many of the owners of these cars remove their catalytic converters, and some go as far to pull the mufflers off the car too. So then you have a short exhaust system, a lot of horsepower, and unburned fuel coming through there. No time for it to cool off so it catches on fire. Honestly though, even if the catalytic converters were still in place, there just isn't enough time in each combustion cycle for the catalytic converters to be effective. So the result is probably they're still going to get flamed depending on the application. The result in these conditions, pops and bangs that would wake the dead, and a flamethrower effect that'll get fanboys clamoring for a closer look. And we see it all the time at car shows when the supercars show up, right? But getting your car to spit flames is relatively easy if you own a turbocharged car, or pretty much a turbocharged anything. It's even easier if you have an anti-lag system or a tune that mimics an anti-lag setup. Now, before you say what is an anti-lag setup, here's what's going on with anti-lag. I know most people know that the basic function of a turbocharger is to turn exhaust gases into horsepower, if you break it down to its most simple explanation. A turbo works by repurposing spent exhaust gases to turn a small turbine inside a turbocharger, right? Most people know that. That turbine is connected by a shaft to an impeller in the compressor section of the turbo at the front, right? That impeller draws in fresh air, and the compressor sends that compressed air through an intercooler, right? And then it pumps it up into the intake, and eventually that goes into the engine. That's how it works. But there is a drawback with turbos. Each time that you let off the gas, the exhaust gases stop moving the turbo. So now the turbo has basically stopped spinning, right? So when you get back on the gas, the turbo will start to spin again, and it takes time to get up to speed to create boost. But the time it takes to start producing boost is something called lag. Turbo lag, we probably all heard that phrase. If you've driven an old Porsche 930, you know what turbo lag is. Manufacturers and tuners use something called an anti-lag system today. You'll find this on high-performance turbo cars like the R35 GTR, Porsche turbos, McLarens, pretty much any high horsepower application that's using a turbo. Drag racers use this too to help them get a quick launch on any kind of car. For example, this R35 GTR, when you see this thing go ba 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 ba, it's anti-lag, right? So anti-lag is basically programmed through your ECU today, okay? It retards the ignition timing to create a smaller, delayed ignition. By having the delayed spark, it allows more fuel to be introduced into the combustion chambers, but the combustion now occurs as late as possible. Now you have a rich fuel mixture which continues to ignite outside of the combustion chamber and into the exhaust manifold, and eventually into the turbine section of the turbocharger. That's why it's called the hot side, right? Once inside the turbine section, the heat within this section of the turbo causes the unburned fuel to further combust, which helps the turbo to spool up and reduces lag. The flames caused by this combustion eventually travel downstream and come out of the tailpipes, where they meet fresh oxygen, which creates the fire, right? Another way to get the fire spinning effect is with two-step rev limiters. These things go back to drag racing many decades ago. Not so long ago, every drag racers were using one of these systems from companies like, say, MSD as an example, who still sells them, by the way. Today, though, many manufacturers use them to limit how fast your car revs to a certain RPM, like the red line, right, when we're talking about that. But when used as a part of a launch control system, it's basically designed to limit wheel spin to provide better traction. Most people know that if your wheels are spinning, no matter how much horsepower you have, you are not moving forward, you're not getting good acceleration times. A launch control system will limit the RPMs to a certain level so you're right at the edge of grip and slip. Basically, it has multiple functions. Essentially, aftermarket solutions like two-step rev limiters or aftermarket tunes can delay or cut off the ignition electronically through the ECU tune. And of course, without ignition, raw fuel is dumped into the combustion chamber where it finds its way into the exhaust system, right? And we all know what happens next. The now superheated exhaust pipes cause the mixture to light, and voila, you get the fire, baby. That's how it works. So is this good or bad for an engine? Most people can probably guess that it isn't good, but it's not immediately destructive, unless of course your car still has catalytic converters on it, or if the car catches on fire because you were doing it too long, which we've seen plenty of those videos, right? Some factory tunes like you would find on some BMW turbo cars have been tested to 100,000 miles. Those are the cars that give you a little bit of crackle in the exhaust during downshifts, coasting, that kind of thing. Those are probably safe. And while some people find the sound unpleasant on certain types of cars and they think that the car is running poorly or something, people with a trained ear know what it's all about, and a lot of people like them. But two-stepping excessively with turbo cars is not a good idea. Experts generally agree that revving unnecessarily puts wear and tear on your car. But the main risk, they freely admit, is from setting your car on fire in certain models. It doesn't happen to a lot of cars, but there are some that do suffer from that problem. I've never seen any data, though, that states that two-stepping a car destroys the engine or turbo any faster than someone that just drives the car hard. I'm sure somebody has that data, but I've never seen it, so I'm not going to comment. But there have been thousands of incidents of people who setting their rear bumper of the car on fire, or even components underside of the car. It's happened on R35s. I've seen in many other cars. And of course, since everyone is filming that stuff, you can bet that your car insurance company will probably hear about it, and you'll probably be charged with an at-fault incident, which basically means that your insurance will go up, way up, or maybe be canceled, especially if you're under a certain age, like under 30. So while it's not likely that you'll damage your engine if you do this a few times a year, you got to remember that if you live the pops and bangs life, there is no solid data that I can say how long your engine will live if you abuse it. So you'd use it at your own risk, right? But you got to remember, though, intentionally revving and shooting flames is against the law pretty much in every state and pretty much in every country. So it's an easy way for a cop to get you a ticket, right? So you got to keep that in mind. As far as how the noise is perceived by spectators, you already know the answer. There's a whole group of people who lose their freaking mind when they hear that, and they come running over and the phones are out and the TikTok videos are going and all that other kind of stuff. And of course, there are people who are running the show who generally frown upon it because basically, Karens and people who live next to car show venues don't appreciate the extra noise. So time and place, right? Right time and right place, car shows probably ain't it, right? In their eyes, it paints the automotive enthusiast as being annoying, inconsiderate, and immature. Small PP jokes come to mind, but what do they know, right? The problem is those are the people say yes or no, we can have those car shows in those parking lots, so chill, guys. As for teenage boys, they'll laugh, they'll cheer, they'll swarm around the car in hopes of getting just a smidgen of footage for their Instagram or TikTok page. Hey, that's their thrill for the day, right? Now, 19-year-old me would have been all over it, if I'm being honest. 50-year-old me says, your life, your choice, but I walk away from it because I can't be involved in that kind of stuff. But I'm listening. However, it's my opinion that some engines sound better than others, so deal with it. And a few of them sound really freaking horrible, and I'm going to tell you about those right now. You didn't think I was going to say something about that, right? BMWs with this little crackle tune, it sounds like something's broken. Damn! Straight pipe Mustangs don't sound good at all. They're just absolutely obnoxious. And the EcoBoost cars sound like they're blowing through a rubber chicken. It's not a pleasing sound to me. But if you're into those cars and that's your jam, have at it. Some cars literally sound like someone left marbles in their clothes dryer. And again, this is all personal preference, so you do as you choose, man. It's your car, it's your money, and it's your car payment, so do what you want to do. Just know the consequences, all right? But I will say this, if you're doing that stuff, please remember to carry a fire extinguisher in your car at all times, because you never want to be that guy who sets his car on fire because you're being filmed all the time, and you have to remember that if something bad happens, somebody probably got it on video. We also call those video clips evidence, so be smart about where you do it and when you do it. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? What cars sound cool? What cars don't sound cool? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.